Welcome back to Z-Speed and thanks for tuning back in. Today we're going to be replacing the camshaft position sensor on this 2004 350Z sensor A, which is the passenger side. And I'm going to recommend right off the bat that you go with the new and improved OEM camshaft position sensor from Nissan, because I had trouble with an aftermarket sensor, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. But I just wanted to show you the original one here. It's plastic, rectangular shaped here, and it did last 15 years, so I'm pretty happy about that. No problems with this thing until this year, and now it's finally failed. And this is the new version that Nissan's come out with, and it's now made of metal. They spent a little more time and money designing this, and it's a little bit shorter, but it still has the exact same harness plug up, so it's a plug and play. So I decided finally to go with this one. It's much more expensive. It's 161 bucks versus paying like, 35, 50, 75 bucks on some of these aftermarket sensors, but they're designed to last as long as the original. And these aftermarket versions, I've heard of them failing within a year of replacing them, or a few months, and people will have to go and get a new sensor even though it's under warranty. They're replacing them all the time. I just don't think it's worth the time and effort to keep replacing an aftermarket sensor, and I would just stay with a Nissan, because these VQ engines are very sensitive when it comes to these camshaft position sensors. You really want to run a Japanese sensor in a Japanese engine, you know what I mean? So stay away from those aftermarket ones, but if you can't afford it, then you can give them a try. Now, this is a little diagram that Nissan gave me. Just wanted to show you kind of the position of the sensors, and this is the side we'll be replacing, but here is the harder sensor to replace. This is the driver's side, and it's underneath the plenum, pretty hard to get to. You may have to remove part of your intake to get in there and visualize it, but we really won't be looking at that one today. We'll be going over the passenger side, and it doesn't slip in from the top as this diagram shows, but it kind of comes down right here in this area. Now let's go over some of the signs and symptoms that you're going to run into that'll give you a clue that it might be your camshaft position sensor. First thing is that it doesn't matter if it's automatic like this one or manual, you're still going to get these same lights going off. You got your slip, your traction control, and your service engine soon light will all three go off. Even though you haven't even moved, your slip sensor is going to go off, so that's a big clue right there. And you can see I'm down here toggling my traction control switch, trying to get it to turn on and off, and it won't. It's just staying lit the whole time. And the reason for this is because these sensors are all interconnected to the camshaft position sensor. Once the camshaft position sensor A or B goes out, it'll trigger the slip and the traction control, and then you'll know, hey, maybe I've got something going on with my camshaft position sensor. We do need to figure out which sensor it is, of course, and that's where you're going to need a code reader, and I happen to have one, so I'm going to go ahead and plug that in here and see if we can determine what sensor's out, if not both. So the port is right here. It's easy to get to. I have a Actron code reader, but if you don't have one, you can go down to AutoZone, and they can also read it for free and tell you which sensor is burned out or if both are. So that's a little tip for you right there. Now we've got the scanner all hooked up, we can just run through the prompts. It'll pretty much tell you what to do, and all we have to do is sit back and wait and let it read all of the codes that have popped up, and then we'll kind of evaluate from there. There we go, done deal. Now we can just pan down and see what we've got here. So right now it looks like we've got, there it is, read codes 1130 engine signal 1, which I'm not real sure exactly what that means. I could look that up, but I'm going to just keep panning down. Here's a 0340 camshaft position sensor A, bank 1, like we thought we might have had a problem with that one. So boom, there it is there. That's pretty straightforward. And then we're going to keep panning down. We've got the same problem again. And let's see what else we've got here. We've got knock sensor, so I'm sure it's got something to do with the camshaft position sensor that's triggered that. And let's see what else. This is the last one we've got, and it's now confirmed. Bank 1, sensor A is failed. So at least we know that it's just one sensor at this point, and that's going to be a lot easier than replacing both. So I'm going to try to show you a little visualization here of where exactly sensor A is. And you can see there is the gray little coupling or the wire harness right there, and you can see that 10 mil bolt, and that's all that's holding this thing in. So that's the good news. It's just one 10 mil bolt. Unbolt that and slide the camshaft position sensor out, and then we'll try to get it loose. And back in there, hidden way down there, is the other sensor, and we're not going to worry about that right now. So I did actually try to get a aftermarket sensor to work in here, and that was a no-go. Like I talked about earlier, this is the one I got right here from A1 Auto Parts, but they gave me a full refund. That was very nice of them, because I told them it did not work. Here's the other sensor, and it's got a little different configuration here, but we're not going to be installing that at all. But now we're going to go over here and try to get this sensor A in. So I've got a great little tip for you before you even get started. If we could get this part of the electrical harness removed from this clip right here and pull it up, it'll be a lot easier to access that camshaft position sensor. So what I've got here is a large flathead screwdriver, and basically the action is to push down on this little clip and kind of turn it at the same time. Now I've had a little trouble getting it loose, but it's really actually not that hard. I make it look a little harder than it really is right here. But you just push down, and I thought I had it unclasped right here, but no. I had to push it a little bit more to get it to completely disconnect, and you can see right here, almost got it, and bingo, right there. That's all you have to do, and you can see it's unattached now. Now I can gently grab this electrical harness, and what I'm going to do is kind of pull it straight up, and I'm going to go real slow and easy because we surely don't want to damage this harness. So just take your time, and you can move it, pull it straight up is what you really want to do, and that'll give us really good access to that camshaft position sensor. That's all you have to do. Just come up just a little bit, and it really gives us a lot better access at this point. Now we've got this electrical harness pulled up, we can come underneath it with a 10 mil socket and a little extension. You can get right in here and crack this little 10 mil bolt loose. Or you can actually come in this angle right here with the open end 10 mil wrench and break it loose. And that's actually what I did. It was just a little easier for me to go that route. But either way will work. But before I do that and unconnect and disconnect that sensor, I want to go ahead and disconnect my negative battery cable here. When you're dealing with the electrical system, you really do not want to have your battery connected. You want the ECU to be in the dark, so to speak, and not be able to see what you're doing. As far as disconnecting sensors and plugging sensors in, you want to do it all after the battery has been disconnected. So I'm just going to tuck that away, and we're ready to go ahead and pull that camshaft position sensor out now, and we can work on disconnecting it. So it was a little hard to film, so I'm gonna wait till after the fact, but I've actually taken the bolt out by hand. Be careful not to lose that 10 mil bolt down there in your transmission area. But then I just slid the sensor out, and I've laid it here. We're not going to separate the sensor from this harness yet, because I've got a better position that you can put it into before you can separate the two. But I wanted to show you that little dark gray tab. You can see that there's a light gray harness right here, and then you see that dark gray little tab. I'm gonna point to it right here. That has to be pushed forward, and this is the actual position that you want it in before you release the sensor from that harness. Is pushed forward right here. And if you've had your sensor in there for quite a while, like this one's been in for 15 years, it may be kind of baked in there, and I had a little trouble separating the two. I had to actually put a screwdriver between the sensor and this harness. Of course, you don't want to damage your harness at all, so be very careful. But this tab has to be pushed forward or it will not separate. So an easier way to separate the sensor from that little plug is to just take that whole setup and just thread it underneath that harness that we moved up earlier, and then come up here next to the firewall, and then you can get a little more slack, and then you'll be able to get both your hands on the sensor and the plug and manipulate it a little easier. Now you can see that I've kind of semi-separated already, but just make sure, like I talked about earlier, that this plug is pushed forward. That little gray tab is pushed all the way forward or it will not separate. And what I had to do is get a flathead screwdriver between the two. Once I've pushed this forward, and I put a flathead between the two and kind of popped it loose. And I took my sweet time doing it because I didn't want to damage that harness, and it was literally baked on there like I talked about earlier. So if you've never changed it before, take your time. Do not damage that little harness because you don't want to have to replace that. But yeah, once you finally get it separated, then we're just going to plug the new one right back in. Now I just want to show you a quick little thing that I found out completely by accident with this little plug here. Now I told you that I had a aftermarket camshaft position sensor that didn't work correctly, so I came back in here after I tried it and I had to replace it with the new OEM sensor from Nissan. But I popped it into this open position here before I went to replace it, and then I got a flathead screwdriver and I just kind of pushed forward a little further just to see what would happen, and it actually ejected my sensor. So I guess it's supposed to eject it if you push a little further. Once you get it in the open position, just take a big flathead screwdriver and push forward just a little more, and it will actually eject it. Now, I doubt it'll work if your sensor's baked in there for 10 or 15 years. It probably won't work, but if you've recently replaced it, try that method. Just push in after it's in the open position, and it should eject your camshaft position sensor for you. Okay, now that we've got the sensor back in, don't forget to buckle down your little electrical harness here and make sure you put plenty of torque on your camshaft position sensor. Obviously it's made of plastic, so you want to break it, but make sure that it's nice and tight. We do not want that camshaft position sensor coming loose on you while you're driving around. Okay, it's a moment of truth. We got the camshaft position sensor in. Let's give her a crank. Now don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time, just keep on repairing.